You are here with By the Cover. Today I'll be reviewing the stories in the collection Four Past Midnight by Stephen King. This book was 960 pages and took me 10 days to read. Overall, I would give this collection a 6.72 out of 10. This review will contain spoilers, so if you do not want to hear those, click off now. First up, we have The Langoliers. This story was the longest in the collection at 296 pages. I would rate this one a 7.5 out of 10. Overall, I really enjoyed it, but it did have a few flaws. As far as the strengths of the book, the story had a great atmosphere and focused on a small group of characters trying to figure out the mystery of why they were in the predicament that they were in. The character work is great, and it really carried the story. I liked Brian the pilot's character and his backstory. I liked Dina. Nick's character was great and he served as good comedic relief. I enjoyed Albert's character and his daydreaming. Craig Toomey was an awesome antagonist with a great backstory. He had great reasoning for why he was the way that he was. You could somewhat empathize with his character. I loved how the primary villains of the story tied in with Craig's past and the abuse that he suffered at the hands of his father. The story kept and held my attention throughout the majority of it, and I really enjoyed the story as a whole. It was an original and very interesting premise. The two weak spots were the pacing dragged in certain areas, and I wasn't a big fan of the ending of the story. Next up, we have Secret Window, Secret Garden. This was 177 pages long, and I would rate it a 6.2 out of 10. It's a bit of a mixed bag. I really loved the premise of the story and the twists at the end of it. I thought it had interesting characters and great tension building. It is very long-winded, however, constantly repeating points, having long drawn-out conversations that also repeat, going over the same thoughts repeatedly with the protagonist in his head, which is where we spend the majority of our time. All of this makes the story drag along at a snail's pace. The exciting parts are great, but a lot of this one is fluffing to pad the page count. It was still a very enjoyable story, even with those flaws. I thought the twists near the end were awesome. I think this story could have been 70 pages shorter and would have been better for it, but it was still quite enjoyable. Next, we have The Library Policeman, which I think is the crown jewel of this collection. It was 252 pages, and I would rate it a 9.5 out of 10. I absolutely love the premise of the story. It tapped into a childhood fear that I myself have had, which is what happens when you do not bring a book back to the library on time. As adults, we understand this is not a big deal, but as a child, this can be one of your worst nightmares. The idea seems simplistic, and it starts out that way. The story then veers off in directions I was not expecting it to go, which were even better than the original concept. The protagonists in this story kept me engaged. I thought all of them were quite interesting. Sam, Naomi, Dirty Dave, and Craig were all entertaining. Sam's character was someone I could somewhat relate to, feel empathy for, and just enjoy being along the journey with. Even the side characters were entertaining. Ardelia Lords was a great antagonist, along with the library policeman. I loved the tie-in with it, and that was not a direction that I was expecting the story to go. The story had some great comic relief moments as well, which broke up the tension. The Library Policeman 2 chapter is one of the most disturbing, upsetting, and heartbreaking things I have ever read. As far as disturbing subject matter with impact goes, Stephen King did an extremely good job on that chapter. I absolutely loved the conclusion of the story. I thought it was hopeful, offered a great redemption arc, and had me on the edge of my seat till the very end. This is a prime example of doing a vampire-esque story correctly. This story had an interesting original premise. I'm not a fan of typical vampire stories, but if unique twists are offered on the concept, then I can get behind them. I enjoyed this story far more than Salem's Lot because of this. I thought it was a far more creative take on the concept. Overall, I can't say enough good things about this one. This is a rare example of King getting the page count right for the subject matter. I really enjoyed it. Lastly, we have Sundog, which is 198 pages. I would rate this one a 3.5 out of 10. I believe this is the weakest story in this collection. I love the premise of the story, however, pacing issues and weak character work drag this one down below average. There are two characters that we spend the majority of our time with, Kevin and Pop Merrill. I think both of these characters are just okay. I liked Meg in Kevin's family, which is his younger sister, but the remaining family members are quite bland characters. I thought the story started off well, slowly unveiling the mystery of the camera, but I did not like the shift in story perspective to Pop Merrill. There is nothing really thrilling or interesting about that portion of the story. The story ends up being too much of a slow burn for me with characters that aren't really engaging. I think the premise of the story was original, but the execution fell short. Overall, even though some of the stories had a lower score, I thought all of them were very original and intriguing. I really enjoyed this collection overall. That's about it. We'll catch you later.